A total eclipse of the foxtail, in which I go looking for trouble in a perfectly good field. We're in the middle of eclipse season, a time of observation and a free-floating sense of being untethered. If you've been feeling sudden waves of grief that have no basis in your current reality, you're not alone. Last week I spoke with at least a dozen people, myself included, who were slammed by a sense of heart-wrenching sadness. It's a time for digging deeply into your feels and sorting through and tossing the things, emotions, memories, and desires you don't need anymore. That's why I'm going to talk to you about foxtail grass today. There's a lot of wisdom and warnings packed into the maturity of those barbed seed heads. Before we get started with this week's essay, I want to remind you that I join you every Thursday morning to share stories from the farm. Your subscription supports our herd of senior horses and the preservation of this land. Consider becoming a patron of this little farm in South Carolina that is changing the horse world in a global way. Now let's get started. In what feels like another lifetime, I sold hay. Our hay broker sold his farm during the pandemic and moved to the coast. I don't blame him. Faced with the reality of working alongside the temperamental whims of other hay suppliers, I worked steadily to track down the contact information for the growers my previous hay dude had purchased from. When that didn't work, I resorted to begging. Finally, I had a name and number. I have too many horses to feed to be pathologically choosy about hay quality. I've fed basic fescue hay most of my horse-loving life because it was once plentiful in upstate South Carolina. I don't keep pregnant mares, so a potential sensitivity to a fungus growing on the fescue that depletes their milk supply didn't apply to me. Fescue was a great, affordable, mid-quality forage, but there was always the risk that it was one step away from being cow hay. Cow hay is stemmy, weedy, dusty, and weathered. Cows digest tough fibers better than horses. My supplier, up until the pandemic, imported richer hays from a grower in Kentucky. I'd lived the progression from a small 2-string bale of hay costing $4 out of the field to much of our region's hay being transported from other states at $15 to $20 a bale. When the broker closed up shop, I would have done anything for a new supplier. For a few months, I purchased loosely bound bales that had been rebaled from large rounds and paid tax on each shipment by having to listen for hours to the continuous, relentless speeches of the bored driver who delivered it for us to unload. We were a captive audience. When I finally secured a number for the grower in Kentucky, I knew I'd have to change my routine from buying small monthly batches to storing and selling semi-trailer loads. The farmer took mercy on me and agreed to take me on as a client, but I had to learn how to move hay fast. The hardest part was the labor. I'm not alone in this. We are no longer living in a time when people are willing or physically able to move and stack hay. I had to acclimate my body to moving 100 or more bales at a time. And this is coming from someone who works outside all day and is accustomed to weather and lifting. So much about hay is automated these days. Small squares come in 21 bale bundles because there is no one left to lift and toss hay as it's made in the field. Machines do the work now, lifting and stacking the bundles. To make matters worse, hay is baled in warm climates during the hottest part of the year. As I started selling and lifting and stacking hay, I received a lot of messages and calls from people looking for organic hay, free of herbicides and pesticides. I am also a chemical-free sort of land manager. Our long-term weed management is centered on out-competing the unsavory plants by mowing and planting the grasses we want. It's a very long-term strategy. I just don't want our horses eating Roundup or having it seep into the well water. Hay growers don't have the luxury of time. We're losing land and farmers by the year. Those same buyers who are seeking organic, horse-quality hay make your basic white girl ordering at Starbucks look like the most easygoing customer. They're going to freak out if there is a weed in their hay. The very same people who are spending thousands on back-to-nature retreats in Costa Rica are appalled, angry, and stricken if they purchase a bale of hay that contains anything but the finest, pure grasses. They also need you to provide a recent hay analysis from the Agricultural Extension Service for the current batch, showing the exact moisture, protein, fiber, energy, sugar, and mineral levels in the product. I'm a sucker for good quality hay, just like the other horse people. But we're running out of hay growers. And I realize that I'm not in a position to feed a herd of horses without nature getting in the way. I've purchased a truckload of hay that was about to combust from the heat generated by fermentation because it was baled too wet. I've had a boarder's horse eat a blackberry briar that wrapped around its epiglottis and had to be surgically removed. I once found a dead turkey in a bale of hay, big botulism risk, and routinely find crushed soda cans smashed into flakes of hay. I say all this because of Foxtail. This simple weed, so lush and pretty to look at, about brought me to my knees my first year of selling hay. The whole point of this endeavor was to keep a steady supply of hay for my horses. Foxtail became my Achilles heel. Often the hay we received was packed near or on top of straw, a byproduct of harvesting wheat, barley, and other grains. All of these plants have seed heads. Over time, every single seed head found in a bale of hay was suspected to be foxtail by certain clients. The seed heads of the very same grasses they wanted to feed became potential foxtail. I had to listen to people bitch about foxtail so often that I became intensely paranoid about foxtail. I stared at plants in the field and I studied photos online. Any greenery sprouting a fluffy head became suspect. As the foxtail seed heads mature and dry, their bristles become stiff and capable of causing trouble. When young, green, and soft, this isn't a problem for the horses. But once the plant finishes college and starts spreading its resume about, the grown-up seed can embed its little fish hooks in a horse's mouth tissue and refuse to budge. When this happens, a veterinarian is called to remove the microscopic interlopers before they can abscess and cause infection. I know this because the internet tells me. If a bale of hay contains foxtail, it doesn't necessarily mean that a horse will have a problem. Some will eat around it, others will ingest it. A 2001 study at a Missouri boarding stable documented an outbreak linked to their hay source. And a 2018 study of 323 Hungarian horses also linked the problem to hay being fed, with the issue resolving when the hay was removed. I have not found a published study showing that horses are affected by foxtail growing green in a field. Did the knowledge of the low threat keep me from absolutely freaking out when we discovered foxtail growing in the wild for the very first time when we moved the horses to Lavender Hill? Absolutely not. Unlike the weird suspects that seem to pop up spontaneously in fields like milkweed, super toxic to horses but awesome for butterflies, foxtail spreads by seed rather than underground rhizomes, thank God. It's an annual plant, meaning that it's one and done, sprouting, living, dying, and then moving on to the great meadow in the sky. But foxtail seeds are numerous and wily. The plants love summer heat and hang out through spring and early summer before sporting their telltale floofy seed heads in late summer. A single plant can produce hundreds to thousands of seeds. They fall to the ground and create a rich seed bank that waits for future ideal conditions. Some germinate the next year. Others remain dormant, waiting for the right drought or disturbance. This summer, we encountered the ideal conditions for foxtail to flourish at the farm. An early, harsh drought followed by copious rains. This plant is ancient. It has followed farmers as far back as we can trace, all the way to the moment when humans had had enough of the huntings and the gatherings and decided to put down roots, stay in one place, till the soil, and complain about the weather. The invention of agriculture was probably also the beginning of gossip. Green foxtail is believed to be a wild ancestor of foxtail millet, which we can trace back some 8,000 years to Asia, where it was cultivated as a grain before rice became a staple. Some foxtail made its way from Europe to America as agricultural stowaways. This plant has followed the arc of the human story since we began keeping track of our comings and goings. When we moved into the new farm last September, I noted seed heads that looked suspiciously like foxtail in the graveyard field where the geldings now live and flourish. But cold weather was coming, we were all figuring out best practices, and there wasn't enough time to worry about it. This summer, I noticed a few green seed floofs as I bush-hogged the field, but nothing that felt like an invasion. Yet, a few weeks after mowing, all I could see was foxtail. The boys ate around the little islands of varying greens. The foxtail was sly. It calculated the relative height of the mowed grasses and produced seed below that line. What was one or two patches in an unoccupied field last year bloomed under hoof weight and drought. I studied the grass islands where it flourished and noticed that the foxtail braided itself between the bluegrass and fescue, trying to blend in and almost succeeding. I would never have noticed or worried about this plant if it weren't for the people freaking out about it potentially being in the hay. I don't sell hay anymore, thank heavens. I'll leave that business to less empathetic brokers who are gifted at ignoring all the noise. What I did was this. I dialed down the smaller mower to a setting that wouldn't scalp the ground, and I roamed the field, mowing patches of foxtail as I spied them. This served two purposes. It removed the young green seed heads from their food supply, and it made me engage in a mindless, meandering task that was slow enough to force me to notice all the other details. I hadn't been seeing the field for the foxtails. As always, the boys helped me as I mowed. They inspected the mower while I paused to open and close the gate. They alternated between curiosity and mortal terror as I mowed near where they grazed. When their curiosity won, which it always does, they'd stand in front of the mower and we'd all pause in an impasse of politeness where we'd stare at each other awkwardly and have no idea which one should move first. Here's the thing. I didn't discover foxtail. This plant is ancient. It knows more about me than I know about myself. Foxtail has been tagging along on the heels of agriculture for thousands of years. I noticed the foxtail because I'd been conditioned to fear it. Foxtail was such a problem for everyone else that it eventually became my problem. When we purchased the farm, I finally saw a foxtail plant, a real one in all its green glory, and it totally matched all the photos I'd seen on the internet. My fear took a few industrious plants and turned the entire field into foxtail. I couldn't see anything else. By the time I wandered through the field chopping islands of random seed heads, the horses went about their business saying, "Lady, we're fine." It was so incredibly and so deeply frustratingly human to take something that has been growing unnoticed beside us for a very long time and use our discovery of the thing as evidence that something has changed. We do this with weeds and symptoms in our bodies. We do it with relationships. We do it with grief and things that we regret. Once something enters our field of vision, we circle around it until the field disappears entirely and there is only foxtail, its lurking danger growing in every corner we search. I've not been able to find documentation that the green and growing foxtail plant has harmed a horse. The leaves of the plant are considered safe and nutritious forage. The danger is when those dried, mature seed heads are baled into hay. We're not growing hay at Lavender Hill. We're not growing hay because I will never again subject myself to the misery of selling it. I'm just going to be thankful for the guys who keep us stocked. In this time between two eclipses, it's important to remember what an eclipse does. A celestial object temporarily obscures another celestial object. One thing has moved to just the right spot to obscure anything that exists behind it. Foxtail became my eclipse. As we feel our old feelings and sort through our inventory of the stuff rising to the surface in this weird eclipse energy, it's a good time to take stock of what has moved so close to our attention that it's obscuring our view of the entire field. My old hay clients wanted me to provide them with nature without all the nature mess. They wanted organic hay without chemicals, but they also wanted that hay to be free of weeds. We crave back to nature experiences, but we want them in good weather with tidy beginnings, middles, and endings. We're appalled at the seeming disorder inherent in actual nature. And here I was wanting a healthy pasture, but my anxiety took over. And I was obsessed with eradicating a normal thing that grows in fields. I promise to be better when I'm ordering my drinks at Starbucks. Spot mowing the field allowed me to practice discernment instead of eradication. And all the while, the horses gathered in front of me, creating an absurd traffic jam that slowed my thoughts and kept me noticing the world in front of me. This is my work between the eclipses. I'm learning how to not rip out everything that frightens me simply because I've learned its name. I'm learning the difference between awareness and danger. I'm learning how to discern what needs to be ripped out, what needs to be cut back, and what needs to be left alone. And I'm learning how to get out of my own way so I can start seeing the whole damn field. Because the horses, of course, never mistook the foxtail for the field. Love, Kim.